Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar about raw milk versus CMR. And it's great to see that we have so many participants from different parts of the world. So good morning and good afternoon, I have to say, actually. Before we start, some instructions for the webinar. Well, for a better experience, please use a PC, a Mac, or even a tablet. And we strongly recommend you to mute your microphone to avoid echoes for the speakers. If you have questions, please send them in the chat box in English, please. And we try to answer them directly, or if that's not possible, we will answer them in the question and answer session at the end of this webinar. We also will launch some poll questions during this webinar, and that poll question will pop up in your screen, and the only thing you have to do is answer them. There's no right or wrong in this answer. It is to learn from your market situation. To start with this webinar, a webinar about a much discussed topic on a farm. Should I feed my calves raw milk or CMR? And this topic raised still many questions. And we roughly estimate that about 50% of the professional farms worldwide feed raw milk to their calves. And this could be for several reasons. But the most important thing is, what are the results? What is the health and the performance potential of the calves in this situation? As in the end, you want to create a profitable farm, and therefore a healthy and productive herd makes all the difference. My name is Malou Gosselink and I'm Market Segment Manager calf. And I'll be the host of this session and take you, together with my colleagues, through our story. The agenda of today, and then I'll try to get the next slide again. There it is. Well, this session of today of about 1 hour, we learn about what the differences are in the composition between raw milk and CMR, but also the implications on calf health and development. And we show some technical results of trials we did. But we will also give you more insight in some target values in the growth curve of a calf that to lead to the goal in the end, and that is the optimal insemination moment and first calving age. And we will show you a special tool, which you can also try yourself, that give an indication how CMR can profit your business compared to feeding raw milk to your calves. Of course, there's room left to answer all your questions. And what I said before, you may ask them during the presentations or save them for the end of the session. And in case we do not have enough time to answer all your questions in this webinar, we will come back to them via email. Today, we have two speakers and I will introduce them to you. First speaker will be Johan Lemmen, and he is our marketing and development research manager. And he has already more than 20 years experience in dairy technology and young animal nutrition. And next to Johan, we have speaker Stijn Broekhuis, and Stijn is global development specialist for the calf milk replacer portfolio. And he's a farmer's son and studied veterinary medicine and animal sciences. Well, then let's start with the webinar, and I will give the word to Johan Lemmen.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon for the ones where it's all afternoon already. To start with this webinar, I want to start with setting the scene, because of course we're going to talk and discuss today about the differences between CMR and raw milk, but it's for us always very important to share and to focus on why do we care so much about those young animals. And it's not about that young animal only. It's not about that calf, but it's about the future of our industry. It's about the future of our uh, dairy farm. So therefore, and for the ones who had the webinar last month already, it could be a bit of a repetition, but for the ones who are the first time here, it's good to focus once more on infographic to see where the calf is in the whole quality and the whole continuous improvement of the dairy farm. Now, of course, we know that that calf, that rearing calf, is meant to be a cow on the end, but the importance of that calf we want to focus on. And if you can keep that calf healthy, you will have more healthy heifer. And if you have that more healthy heifer with a better condition, but also with a better development, it will become, after all, a healthier cow, which not only produces more milk, but also for a longer time. And I will show you a graph about that in a minute. But for us, it's also important, and I hope that now the next slide would come. Yep. It's also important to see where the herd is in the whole circularity, because it's not only about the herd, it's also about the farmer and the planet. We see it as a whole picture, and we want to focus on that by keeping our calves in a better health and a better condition. Because we know when that herd is improving year on year by better young stock management, we know that the farmer will gain a better result, not only financially, but also in motivation, in cost, in the cost picture, but also in less labor and more fun at its work. So it's always more fun to work with a healthy herd than it is working with animals who are not healthy. That's endly not unimportant as well is the sustainability of it. When we are able to have the same milk production to feed the people on our planet with less production units or with less cows, it will help also in sustainability. And everything starts with that one animal, that calf after birth or already during birth. To be a bit more precise about that function of that calf, I have a few slides which show how important it is that you focus on that good development of that young calf. And the first is a trial done with the Wageningen University, where several groups of heifers were measured on weight on 6 months. And those animals were followed during the rest of their life, and they were looked at how much of those animals were still present on the after the first lactation, after the second lactation, and after the third lactation. And we see, and I will try to put it on my pointer. That's not working. Maybe you see my arrow. Animals with a lower weight of lower than 165 kilogram. Thank you. 80% of them had survived that first lactation. But you see already only 60% of them survived the second lactation, and only 27% of them survived that third lactation. Therewith, we see that the replacement rate is rather high in this group. When you go then to the groups of animals which had a higher weight at 6 months, about 165 to 185, or even group with more than 200 kilogram at 6 months, we see not only a higher survival rate on after the first lactation, but especially also the second and third lactation had a higher survival rate. That indicates also a lower replacement rate, which we'll show later in this presentation, brings also financial benefits because you have simply less young stock in your farm. To reach that 200 kilograms after 6 months, you need to have an average growth from birth to 6 months of about 860 grams. So that's a nice growth, especially for that first 6 months. But no, and that's I think especially important to mention, if you have 1 or 2 weeks no growth on your heifer on your calf because it's ill or it has a weaning dip, and we will discuss that later on as well, you know that the rest of the time it will need an average growth of 930 grams. So we cannot afford animals to be sick anymore or to have a weaning dip. We need that animal to grow fast without any hiccups, or at least with as small as possible hiccups. In the following slides, and I hope it shows right now. No, one up. Is that also possible? No. Oh, now I'm going to. Why it doesn't listen to me? Yep, this slide I mentioned. In this slide, we see the same groups divided in the same kilograms or the same weight, and we see the milk yield behind them in the first, second, and third lactation. So not only the survival rate is better for calves which have a higher weight after 6 months, but also the milk yield is higher in the heavier group than it was in the lighter groups. And we see that here the average is in the first lactation. Now those two groups are similar, but are much higher than the lightest group. Especially in the second and third group, we see a big advantage of the heavier group instead of the light group. Also, their indication or motivation to have a growth rate as high as possible on your calves. We have a poll question for you to answer. What would be the average first calving at your farms or at the farms of your customers in your markets? You can choose the answer in the pop-up screen, or you can measure how the markets are divided. And I hope to see the answers right now. What we see is indeed a picture which we recognize. It's even a bit higher, I would guess. I know in the Netherlands, for example, it's still on 25.5 months, coming from 26 months. So there's a small improvement in the last period, but we are much higher than what is possible in the best possible practices. When we compare to the best practices, you could reach, or we could reach, first calving age of 22 months or even beneath that. But let's focus on the 22, 23 months. And now again, I hope that it goes to the next slide. And why is that first calving so important? That's what we see in those graphs and on this slide right now. In the left table, we see in the first column different ages of first calving, with after that in the second column the average production, the yield of that first lactation. But especially in the fourth column, you see also the number of lactation which a cow can bring to the table. And when you multiply the number of lactations with the production per lactation, you see that in the blue marked 23 months of calving age, we have a beautiful 38,000 liters of milk which a cow can produce. When, however, the calving age, first calving age, lies on 26 or 27 months, therewith the milk production is lower and the number of lactations is much lower, we come on an average around 20,000 liters. So the difference between 20,000 liters per cow against 38,000 liters per cow makes a huge difference on profitability of your farm, but also makes a huge difference on the sustainability, which we already mentioned, and on the labor cost of your farm. Now, on the right side, you see the same, and it's a research done in Canada, where the highest profitability also reached at 22 and 23 months of age. Therewith, I hope that I could set the scene for the discussion today about whole milk versus raw milk. And I would like to give the word to Stijn, who can take you along in the theory and the practical use of CMR versus raw milk.
Yes, so hopefully everybody can hear me and see me. Then I will go on, request the control. So yes, we start fresh with the question. So question 2, are you or is your market feeding mainly raw milk or CMR to the calves? So we have 3 answers, and I'm very curious what the answer will be. So raw milk, CMR, or raw milk mixed with CMR. So let's see what the answers. Oh, it's a variety of answers. That's very interesting, especially for this this topic, of course. We see 35% of the answers answered raw milk, and also 35 are mixing raw milk with CMR. Well, in the next chapters, I will elaborate on the answers and why you should do and what you shouldn't. So let's go to the next slides. So the CMR has advantages compared to raw milk. So in general, we want to create the best environment for the calf to get the best results, and therefore providing the best possible nutrients is one of the most important pillars to strive for. In one table, as you can see, and I will elaborate in the next slides on them, on all these advantages of providing CMR compared to raw milk. So on the left, you see the raw milk, and on the right, you see the CMR based on whey. So firstly, raw milk has a variation in composition. It's lower in vitamins and minerals. It's in general higher in fat. Has a risk of transmission of diseases. Does not stimulate solid feed intake, so does not stimulate concentrates intake of the calf. Sometimes has antibiotics in the milk, and therefore can have an antibiotic resistance. So if the cow or the calf needs medicine, it is resistant against this antibiotic and has a higher cell count number. Well, in CMR, based on whey, is a constant composition of nutrients. The composition is adapted to the calf's needs for optimal growth and resistance. Has no vertical transmission of diseases, stimulates the solid feed intake, so the intake of concentrates, has addition of health promoting additives to them, is there for cost efficiency in the long run, and is also has a limitation of this weaning dip. And I will of course elaborate on the weaning dip as well. So first off, in the table below, you see fresh milk, the fresh milk composition from 8 days taken just before given to the calves. And you can see that when you are randomly taking whole milk for calves, instead of taking milk from the milk tank, the variation in composition is enormous. So you see a wide, a wide spread. So the calf is also getting milk of different composition every day when it's getting this milk. Well, this causes stress in the gastrointestinal tract, with possible diarrhea as a result. So that's the big variation in composition. And when we look up in the differences in composition, when we have a closer look, with this slide, I want to focus mainly on the vitamins and the mineral differences. On your right side, you can see in the table that the average composition of whole milk versus calfalak has a big variety, starting with the higher fat and protein content of whole milk in percentages dry matter. And when we have a closer look to see the iron and copper quantity that is lower as well in whole milk, Well, iron is used to make hemoglobin in your blood, and it carries the oxygen from your lungs to all the parts in the animal's body. And copper has the function of cytotoxin cells and is able to recognize and kill the pathogens. So these are important minerals. Well, when we have a closer look further down, we see all the noteworthy vitamins. There are big differences in quantity in advantage of CMR. Well, fortification of vitamins will help the calf grow, be healthy and resilient against pathogens. And nowadays, calves are housed indoors, and therefore it is important that calves do get enough vitamin D3. So I want to focus here on the left a bit more on this vitamin D3, also known as the sunshine vitamin. It aids in the absorption of calcium and phosphorus, which helps keeping your bones strong, and yeah, of course, also the bones of the calves strong. When we look at the graph on your left side, you see on the green one the CMR compared with the blue line the whole milk. We compare both vitamin D3 composition in nanograms per milliliter through time, and you see that the differences eventually are noteworthy, and that it is important to provide this calf indoors with enough vitamins due to the bone strength for a future cow. When we go to nutritional diarrhea, this could be the consequence of feeding raw milk. Well, there are many different forms of diarrhea, and there are even more factors that influence the calf of getting diarrhea. Well, nutritional diarrhea, also called non-infectious diarrhea, also called feed diarrhea, is caused by multiple factors. So what is nutritional diarrhea? Well, nutritional diarrhea caused by nutritional factors, the word says it itself, of feeding factors. For example, incorrect feeding, stress, a wrong drinking posture, and large portions with large amounts of fat, for example, could lead to nutritional diarrhea. How to diagnose it? Well, it's a yellowish white manure. The calf has no fever, most common at the age of 1 to 2 weeks. How to prevent it? Even more important, feed more often in smaller portions of the CMR. CMR gives the right composition without variation. So variation, you should get rid of variation. So a constant composition for the calf. Also the same temperature and concentration every day is very important in this. And how to treat it, which sounds a bit easy, but well, feeding the correct milk in the right composition with the right temperature and the concentration is how to solve this problem. But of course, hygiene and management is crucial in this as well. Now we go to the next chapter, the differences in fat digestion. Well, milk fat consists mainly of triglycerides, which is one glycerol connected with 3 fatty acids. The breakdown process of fat is called lipolysis and executed with the enzyme lipase, in which a triglyceride is hydrolyzed to 1 monoglyceride and 2 free fatty acids. Well, in a young animal, the digestive system, which you can see in the scheme on the right side in this picture, is not fully developed yet. The digestion of lipids in the small intestine involves 2 key constituents, one, the bile salts, and the pancreatic lipase. As production of both is insufficient in a young animal, an emulsifier can support the complete digestion of lipid components. Well, this emulsifier supports the complete digestion of lipids by bile salt and pancreatic lipase, increases also emulsification of fats and micelle formation at the end, like you see on number 3, after lipase breakdown. Well, this micelle formation is needed to transport these fats through the bloodstream to give the calf energy. So it results at the end in a higher energy level in the bloodstream, resulting into a better performance of the calf. Raw milk has bigger fat droplets, which are more difficult to digest. This is the reason why we enrich all calf milk replaces with our spray drying technique. Comparing fat in raw milk to spray dried fat, we can conclude that there are more digestible problems with fat from raw milk due to large amounts of fat droplets. Like in the previous slides, the 29% in whole milk on average, instead of 70% of fat in the calf-like products. And on your right side, you see the microscopic view of different particle sizes. And you see also that a spray dried fat has smaller particles. Then in short, what is the spray dried fat technique? It's the micronized fat particles encapsulated by dairy protein. So I will elaborate on the technique. How does it work? Well, because how does it work in the calf's body? Well, because of the fat is encapsulated by protein, it's now soluble in water and therefore easy to digest in the abomasum and intestines. As you can see in the picture here, the whey protein is encapsulating the fat. And also the surface of the particle size is then larger for enzymatic digestion. And in this way, fat is well accessible for bile and digestive enzymes to digest. And why is this important? Well, a proper digestion of fat results in less diarrhea and a higher growth rate, of course. And that's where we want to strive for. And then short on the technique, when you look at the pictures on the left bottom, moving a liquid blend of ingredients through the system. Think of fat, protein, and lactose through the homogenizer. In the homogenizer, the liquid is pushed through a very narrow slit, causing a very high turbulence. And now the large fat droplets are disrupted into smaller ones. And after one more repetition, the fat particles do not merge again into fat droplets. So that's in very short the spray drying technique. And then you see the protein is encapsulating this fat. Then we go to coconut oil for a better digestion. The fat composition of calf-like consists a minimum of 40% of this fat, which is coconut oil. And coconut oil contains a high level of medium chain fatty acids, to be specific, the C10 and the C12. Well, how does this work? The fatty acids are part of the fats, medium chain fatty acids, and they are easier to digest. Why is this important? Well, a proper digestion of fat results in less diarrhea and again in a higher growth rate for the calf. So to conclude in this chapter, 3 advantages on fat digestion of CMR versus raw milk. So firstly, the emulsifier, which supports the complete digestion of lipids with bile salt and pancreatic lipase. The second one is the spray drying technique. That is so the fat is protein encapsulated. Fat is in smaller particles and the protein encapsulated for better digestion. And the third one is the coconut oil for a better digestion through a minimum of 40% of coconut oil in the products. So yeah, that's why it's easier to digest. So the next one, of course, we did trials, and I want to show you the trial results of raw milk versus CMR. Our trials in 2018, in cooperation with the China Agricultural University, resulted in the following. On the left, you see less incidence of diarrhea, as shown in the trial, where we compare the starting point. So after 2 days of colostrum, the calf gets CMR or the calf gets raw milk. And you see that the incidence of diarrhea is way less if you start with a raw milk versus CMR. So on the right, our conclusions of these trials, we saw less diarrhea problems, less respiratory problems, and a lower fever count. So also the results of the antibiotic use can be lowered with 33% with CMR. So another proof that it is important to provide CMR based on trials we did with CMR versus fresh cow milk. And as you can see, the trial resulted in less diarrhea problems and less antibiotic use in percentage of the total calves. So firstly, you see the diarrhea, the total percentage of calves, fresh cow milk versus CMR, and then the diarrhea average in days per calf, and also the antibiotic use. And therefore, we saw that the antibiotic use can be lowered with 33%. Now we go to the target values in growth, and we start fresh with a question. So what is the average growth per day for your calves until insemination? Or as a distributor calves of farms in your market? So let's see what the results are. That's very good that the results are not as much spread as the previous question. And we see that 41% answered the 700 to 900 grams per day, which is very interesting. And I will elaborate on it immediately in the next slide. So target values. If I go to the next one, let me see. Yes. So target values in growth curve to obtain optimal first calving age. Well, the two target values dairy farmers rely on to obtain an optimal first calving age are the animals' height and the animals' weight, compared to the age of the animal, of course. Well, the ideal growth curve, a growth of about 900 grams per day at an age of 30 months is possible and is achievable, but all the factors that can influence the calf growth curve need to be positive, and the calf must not stand still in growth in the whole growth process. It needs a constant intake of nutrients. And whole milk gives a longer saturated feeling to the calf with less intake of the calf as a consequence of this, and a slower digestion. So when we look on the right side, on the other hand, CMR stimulates concentrates uptake and therefore preventing a weaning dip. So the moment a weaning dip is the moment when the calf is not having CMR and relying completely on concentrates. And so it stimulates the growth rate. And that is what we are striving for. So it is important to feed according the standard with gradual transition between housing and feeding to prevent also a weaning dip. As a target, an optimal weight of the heifer is around 375 to 400 kgs at the insemination date. And I'll elaborate on this one in the next slide. And on your right side, we see as an example that a heifer is at that point around 55% of its total mature body size. So how big should a heifer be at calving? Well, you can see it in this picture. Then about the height. So a standstill in growth is disastrous for your growth rate. Well, the age of insemination is possible at 12 to 13 months. That's what we think. But remember that a higher weight at the first calving moment results in a higher milk production. And of course, this is exponential with an optimum. Delaying, on the other hand, insemination date too long results in an overcondition, in which it is more difficult to get a heifer pregnant. So that's a big trade-off. Then the ideal height is around 135 centimeters for the first insemination, as seen in the picture on your right side. So remember the previous slide, the 400 kgs, and then this 135 centimeters of height. So the conclusions from this chapter from target values in growth in the growth curve. Growth of 900 grams per day is possible, but all the factors need to be positive, and the calf needs constant intake support, constant management, and constant hygiene. A standstill in this growth rate is disastrous for the growth rate. Whole milk is digested slower and does not stimulate concentrates intake. Yeah, I see that there is a question. Let me check. There's questions actually. What would be the ideal first insemination or calving age for us to have the cow in the herd for the longest time and also have the highest milk production? Well, that is indeed a very nice question. And I'll go back to the, yep. Yes. So you see that the 55%, so the target one, optimal weight of the heifer is around 375 to 400 kgs at the insemination date. So that's the weight of the heifer at that moment. And you see, of course, the height is around 140 to 135 centimeters. But again, there are many factors that influence this growth rate. So also management and also hygiene are very important to support the maximum growth of the calf. I think the other question I will answer in a few minutes. I will now give the floor to Johan. Thank you.
The next chapter in this presentation or in this webinar will be the translation again from all the advantages and all the examples Stein has given during the last half an hour into what does it mean for your farm. Because of course we can talk about a gram left or a gram right for a very long time, but at the end it needs to be shown that the farmer does benefit from it. And therefore we go to the next slide. I hope. Yeah. And I want to introduce, I want to focus on the so-called improvement tool, the young stock improvement tool we have made based on all the knowledge which is shared up front, but also on the trials we have done ourselves, but also the trials we can find in the literature, the trials done by the Wageningen University, and there was also a question on that. And when I recall right, that is a collection of a big number of cows. The exact number I don't know, but it's also a collection of a number of practical dairy farms. So it's not on a trial station only. It's a combination of a big number of practical farms which they measured and which they followed for a certain time, and which brought those results. Now, to show you that trial of that improvement tool, I have to switch out my pointer, and there it is. We developed that young stock improvement tool not only to translate the advantages of using the right products in that first stage of the calf into the financial benefit, but also to focus on the advantages it will bring. And with that, I mean that it's not only bringing a number of euros or a number of dollars extra in your wallet, but it does bring a number of health benefits. It will bring some cost benefits, again about dollars or euros, but not only on more milk, but on saving cost on, for example, young stock. So that's also a reason why a younger first calving age has certain benefits, simply because you have less young stock or heifers which are not producing milk. So that's the purpose of this calculator. And when I go to the calculator with the button beneath, we can see how it's built up. It's a tool where you can make an example farm, or you put the figures of an example farm in a tool. For example, in this case, we have chosen for a number of dairy cows 100, but you can simply make 1,000 of that. You can see if your farm will grow or it is a steady, continuous farm. You can put in your own first calving age. You can put in your own calf mortality. So when you don't fill it out, it will be a default which is set in the system. But with that setting of your own farm, you can immediately see what a better or an improved rearing period would bring to the farm. And of course, whole milk and CMR, or switching from whole milk to CMR, is one part of that. But of course, the whole calf rearing also exists out of more management tools or activities which are very important. And it starts, of course, with the birth process. It starts with the colostrum. But in this tool, we focus on when you switch from whole milk to CMR, and taking into account that the advantages found from our trials are found from the literature, or found from the examples from the trials from Wageningen, you can therewith calculate the profit. And when you put that button beneath right, you can directly see what the current situation is, which you put in the calculator yourself, and what the improved situation will be. And you maybe recognize the calf diarrhea. We saw in the trials that it would be reduced with 33%. So you go, when you have a current situation of 15%, you go back to 10% of calf diarrhea. So bit by bit, you go through the results of your farm, where diarrhea, mortality is of course very important. Diarrhea is very important when you look to the constant grow we discussed before. When you want to have that constant grow, you don't, and you cannot afford yourself a dip in that growth of multiple weeks caused by diarrhea. The calf should be able to grow undisturbed to reach that 900 gram or that 860 gram to reach a certain first calving age. The first calving age will be calculated based on this tool, not only giving you a better yield in that first lactation and giving you a better longevity of that cow, but also reducing cost of your rearing costs. Because when you have a lower age, you simply have a lower, shorter period in which you have to feed those heifers. On the other hand, that longer longevity, which we discussed, and which is directly linked to the replacement rate, is also in this column, will give you a lower need of female calves. And again, therewith you can improve your dairy herd in time as well. That's the continuous improvement of your herd, and therewith the continuous improvement of your results. Now, when you make that in a financial picture, you can measure, and you can switch the currency. You can switch also the language in this tool to calculate then what that continuous improvement in time will bring to that farm. And here the 100 cows farm can have an improved profit in time of 10,000 euro annually. So that is really significant amount of money. But more important is it's caused by better technical results, and that better technical results not only bring the euros, but also bring a sustainable way of production, brings also a nice way of farming, or a better way of farming with less labor, more fun, if I may call it in that way, and that's actually also that better profit. So David, I want to give the word back to Malou. I think we have first question and answers. But important once more to say, when we are able with the right choices to improve our calf rearing, then we also are, it's possible to improve the results of our farm, or the farms of your customers. Malou, the words to you.
Thank you. And thank you. Thank you, Johan, for your story. Also, Stijn, thank you so much. We're at the end already of our story, and I think it would be interesting to summarize a little. Speakers, what I learned from your story is that to obtain a profitable farm by a healthy and productive herd, CMR provides the most safe, constant, and fully adjusted to a calf's needs nutrition. And by feeding CMR compared to raw milk in trials, you have seen a decrease of 33% of antibiotic use. So less sick animals, meaning less costs, less label, and more work enjoyment. But most of all, more healthy animals. And healthy animals grow and develop better, leading to stronger heifers and a higher producing milking cows. And of course, milk is always available at the farm and is very nutrient rich and valuable product. Though the risk you take to feed this to calves should be very well taken into account, as it could impede the target values you want to reach to obtain your goal, like first calving age. I think it was very clear. You explained the growth curve and that you actually have only one chance to keep on track on this growth curve, and meaning everything has to be right from the beginning. Well, again, thanks Johan and Stijn for sharing your knowledge. And I'm sure there will be plenty of questions. So let's start with the question and answer session. So Johan and Stijn, I'd like to invite you. So please put on your camera, and then I will ask the first question to Johan. Why do you recommend 22, 23 months as an optimal calving age when 23, 24 is giving higher longevity and lifespan yield in your trial from Wageningen? And how many animals were in that trial?
To start with the trial, I just mentioned it was a collection of practical farms where they monitored and followed the cows for a longer time. The exact number of cows I don't recall, but I can find that back in the literature. There's no problem. Why focus on the 23, 22, 23 instead of 23, 24? Yeah, 23 is similar. That's clear. In the first slides, indeed, I showed that the 23 had an optimum. I think when we are able to go to that 23 months of first calving age, that would be great, and then we would really bring a huge improvement on the most of our farms. I do know farms, best practice farms in the Netherlands, who are already on the 22 months, which are showing great results. So if it's 22 or 23, I think we should focus, or we should depend that on the farm. And when a farm is already on 23 and it can make the next step in saving costs of heifers, but keeping a good eye on the longevity, then they should do so, and they should continuously try to improve their farm. For the majority of farms, I think the 24 would already be a major step, and the 23 would be great to achieve. So it's not too much in the number, but it's depending on each farm itself.
Great, thank you, Johan. I see another addition, I think, to the first question Stijn answered already from Kadri Luther. So it's not the age question, but it's the height and weight. I think it's. Can you elaborate a little bit more on this, Stijn? Is that true?
Yes, sure. That's partly true. Partly true, but also you need to keep in mind that the calves are in this the puberty, and the heifer needs to be ready. So it's the age, it's the height, but it's also they need to be ready to be inseminated and to be ready to get a calf at the end. So when you have this growth curve as a heifer, you see at the end it goes in puberty. At that moment, the growth curve is ready. The calf, the heifer in this time, is ready to be inseminated, and then you are ready to go. You see that if you are too late, so you wait It's the same story at the ideal calving age. At 22, 23 months, for example, they need to be ready. If you are too late with insemination, the heifer goes in overcondition, and therefore it's even harder to get pregnant. So you see, there is an optimum, and of course there are many differences, many different farms, different management, but this is the crucial part. So 3 points: the weight at 375 to 400 kgs, the height of 135 centimeters, and the age about 12 to 13 months.
Okay, thank you, Stijn. I think another addition to this question, and Matthew, I've seen your question, so I will come back to your question after this one. Johan, maybe for you to elaborate also on the part of Stijn told already, like what Kadri sees in his market is that the earlier insemination, the better milk production, but at the same time, the animal is culled earlier. So later inseminated animals stay productive longer. Is that also your opinion?
No, I think, and that's a combination with what Stijn already said. It needs to be a combination of the right age, but of course also with the right height and the right weight. Because when you are too early and you have a too small heifer and start inseminating, that could cause earlier culling. What we see in the trials, what we hear in practice and we see in practice is that if you have the good combination of weight, height, maturity, and age, especially those younger cows or cows having a younger, earlier first calving age, will have a bigger longevity. So they are culled later instead of earlier. But it's always a combination of the maturity, the weight, and the age. And we are most of the time a bit too conservative and think, oh, let's wait another month or let's wait another cycle before insemination. But when a calf or a heifer is ready, when it has the height, when it has the weight, please do not wait any longer, because you can already start, and those will show even a longer longevity, which is also showed in the trials we try to show you today.
Great, thank you. A question from Matthew. Matthew is referring. He had a question about, is this all based on Holstein Friesian breeds, or also at crossbreeds and jerseys? Are they also taken into account in the results we presented? Stijn?
It's a very good question. I thought the question was only in Friesland, Friesians. But in this thing, I do not recall what the breeds have been, but I can imagine that for 90% sure that they are indeed Holstein Friesians. And also in the Agriculture University in China, they only have the breed Holstein Friesian.
To add on that, our own trials are for sure based on only Holstein Friesian. The question mark is about the Wageningen trial, knowing that there are a number of farms beneath that trial. Could be that there is 1 or 2 farms with crossbreds, but also then it's mainly Holstein Friesian which is used for these trials.
Okay, another question. Is it not better to get a heifer to 50% of potential mature weight at 9 months to get 3 estrus cycles, or do you think this is putting down too much growth? Johan?
I don't see the question.
And the Q&A.
Sorry. Is it not better to get a heifer to 50% of potential mature weight to get 3 cycles? I think it's putting down too much growth. Before the first insemination, I think you mean at 9 months. I think once you start inseminating, it will bring back your growth. So also there's an optimum going earlier in insemination that can bring break on your growth, on your daily growth, and it can mean also that it's a bit too weak or too light when it has its first calving age or first calving. So I really would think about that 55%, but more important is look at the animal, see how the condition is and how it is developed, because we also know that some bulls have very high weight calves or heifers, and some have a bit lighter ones. So it's not about the exact knowledge of that amount of kilogram, it's also the development, and that's best to be judged by the ones who work with those animals and with their herd day on day by the farmer. I hope that gives an answer on the question. Stein, can you?
Yes, I have just little to add. The only thing, oh, can you mute?
Oh, sorry.
The only thing I want to add is that from theory, we know it all, like 50% at puberty, 55% at of the mature age at a heifer, 135, 400 kgs, etc., etc. And at least at the 12 months inseminated for early milk production. And also we want to have this cow as long as possible with a high milk production. But that's all the theory. I think from practical, it's very important, like Jon already said, look at the moment the heifer is ready for it. And then, I mean, really ready for it. When it's too small or too little, it will also have a trade-off in milk production later. So there's an optimum of so many factors on the animal, on the farm, on the management, and that comes all together, and that makes this also as a entrepreneurial job for a farmer. So what is your ideal point? That's different at every farm.
All right, thank you, Stein. I do not see more questions, so feel free. We have time for, we have another one for more questions, I want to say. Do you have a comparison, average daily growth for calves? Get raw milk and CMR for comparison, I think. Do you have? So do we have average daily growth comparison between raw milk and CMR trials? Do we have numbers on this?
We have for the trials we've done ourselves, of course, we have also a comparison between the daily gains. And what we saw in that trial, Stein showed, is that the daily gain for whole milk was more or less the same as for the CMR. CMR was a few grams more, I recall. But the difference is, and we had a nice discussion before this webinar about those trial results. And the difference is that with the CMR group, the intake of raw fish concentrates was higher, and the weaning dip therewith was much lower. So in that first 10 weeks, you can have also nice growth with whole milk. That's not a problem, I think, especially but with that high fat, high energy level, you can really bring on also some extra fat on the bones, we call it in the Netherlands. We bring in some extra gain coming from that. But with CMR, especially with that raw fish concentrate intake, you can easy decrease the weaning dip, so they will grow faster afterwards, and you will see also a better muscle development. So they are not putting that extra energy in fat, but they will put it in muscle growth. So after 10 weeks, you have the same weight. Only one has more fat, the other will have more muscle in development. The next thing is that there always will be a risk of that feeding diarrhea, as Stein explained, with that high amount of fat, which you can lower that risk with feeding CMR. I hope that answers the question a bit.
Okay, I think the very last question for this session, what were the grams per day were fed on the whey CMR trial, and was it compared with how many liters of whole milk?
we had similar feeding schedules. So we had the same amount of milk given. And when I recall right, it was 911 and 915 grams growth a day. So there were the top results from both sides. Only, yeah, with the CMR, with that better health and with the better development of the calf, especially the muscle.
Great. Okay, thank you, Stijn. Thank you, Johan, for answering the questions. Feel free always, of course, to reach out to us if you have more questions. We are happy to help. We are happy to share our knowledge. Yeah, well, we are at the end of this webinar. What I said, you can reach out to us via different ways. Of course, we have a website, kalflak.com, our newsletter. You can sign up for a monthly newsletter with all kind of tips and practical experiences. Our specialists, our young stock specialists in the field, but also international experiences we try to share. We have a Facebook page, a YouTube channel. You can find all kind of informative videos about practical knowledge. And of course, you can send emails to us. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you for the questions. And I hope you enjoyed. When we're closing down this webinar, there will be a survey, and I hope you want to help us to improve our next webinars by answering some questions. So thank you so much and have a very nice day. Hopefully see you next time again.